Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Welcome to Paddleboarding for Beginners and Beyond. I am Jessica Anderson. I am a sailing specialist with Navionics, and I also do scuba, kayaks, paddleboarding, all the really fun stuff. Just a second, let me mute the other computer. Okay, sorry about that. And I have Brian Galton here with us with Sunrise Paddleboards in Fort Lauderdale. He has been a paddleboard instructor now for 5 years, and he founded Sunrise Paddleboards. So he has been so kind as to join us and answer our questions about paddleboarding. I know there are a lot of you out there that had questions about all the activities you can do on paddleboards and how you can choose a paddleboard. So let's just jump right into it. As I was saying, that I am Jessica Anderson with Navionics. I'd like to thank Navionics for hosting this webinar and giving us the opportunity to get this information out to you. I live in South Florida, just south of West Palm, and I get to paddleboard both on the Atlantic Ocean in Lake Okeechobee and Lake Osborne in the Intracoastal, so I get a chance to do a lot of different types of paddleboarding, but not a lot of the things that Brian gets to do, so I'm super excited to hear about all of the other things that we can do on paddleboards. Brian is, as I was telling you, the founder of Sunrise Paddleboards in Fort Lauderdale. Sunrise Paddleboards is the largest dealer of let me make sure I get this right, the largest manufacturer of paddleboards in the world. And Brian, you can correct me if I got that wrong. He has been an instructor, a paddleboard instructor for 5 years. And Sunrise Paddleboards has founded a lot of really, really cool paddleboarding programs, which he'll have a chance to tell you some about, including things like fitness, yoga on paddleboards, the Venice paddleboarding tour, a lot of different types of paddleboarding. So we're super excited to hear about all of the things that you can do on paddleboards. But first off, why, can you tell me, Brian, is paddleboarding such a popular and fast-growing sport?
Well, it's because it's so fun. It's a lot of people, when they first look at a paddleboard, I think they get a little bit intimidated because it looks like a surfboard, and not everybody has the balance to get on a surfboard, but these are much wider, much longer, and much more stable. If you can walk a mile, you can paddleboard. We have ages that are 7-year-olds, and we have 70-year-olds. So you've got such a wide variety of people that are able to go paddleboarding. And the shocker is when they get on the board and they realize, wow, I'm not even falling in, I'm not even wet. Suddenly it is their new favorite activity, and they go out and they tell all their friends and they bring them because they want to show off that, hey, I can paddleboard. But it's just really fun, it's really easy, and best of all, you're getting healthy, you're getting some good exercise in while you're doing nothing but enjoying eye candy on the water. So you really don't even notice that you're getting good exercise.
That sounds about right for me, and that's exactly what happened with me. I got my first paddleboard. I got on the first paddleboard the first time. I just rented one, and I said, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this. I don't know if I can balance well enough. But it is completely addictive, and you fall off a couple times, and then you get the hang of it, and you start figuring out all the really cool things you can do on a paddleboard. So the next thing that I wanted to ask you about is, what are some of the activities you can do on a paddleboard?
Well, before you do any activities, you should check with your area marine and your Coast Guard and any ordinances in your location to make sure that you're able to go paddleboarding in places that are safe, making sure that you're using life jackets if they're required. I recommend a leash if you're going way out in the ocean. But there's just so many things you can do with a paddleboard. First of all, it's called stand-up paddleboard. You might see SUP, S-U-P, abbreviated. But a lot of people that will go out and paddleboard don't realize you don't have to stand up the whole time. So if you want to sit down, you can sit down. If you want to get a big cooler, sit on it and pull out a fishing rod and go fishing in the middle of your lake, you can go fishing. If you are brave enough, I've had people cool me on the back of boats like a jet skier would, or it's a lot of fun finding creative things to do. I don't recommend that you quite get that advanced until you just learn how to do the basics of paddleboarding. But once you do that, you can escalate yourself into surfing on a paddleboard. Paddleboarding's been around a long time, and the Hawaiians, they really didn't take to it at first. I think they kind of looked at it as a little bit with a frown because it seemed too easy. But nowadays, they've come to realize that being able to stand up on a paddleboard has a big advantage in the ocean because you can look out and you can see that big kahuna wave coming in. So now they're able to cherry pick, and then they're able to use the paddle and the size of the board to ride that wave a lot longer. So that's just one of many activities. I believe in a few years, we will probably start seeing people jockeying for the Olympics. I feel pretty confident that paddleboarding will become an Olympic sport. Racing is already very popular in California, in Florida, because we're obviously warm year round down here. But that's not to hesitate. There's the Carolina Cup in the Carolinas. All over, racing is becoming very, very popular. And then, of course, the fitness side of it. We do fitness classes. We do paddleboard yoga. And probably my favorite of all activities would be we simply take a milk crate and load it. We anchor it on the front of the board. And not all boards have cargo tie downs. I don't know if you can see these maybe right here on my board, but you're able to take a cargo net and attach a milk crate. And with that milk crate, you can put your scuba gear in there, or I would rather say snorkel gear because scuba gear is probably a little heavy. But put a dive mask and a snorkel and some fins, and we're able to paddle out to the Bio Rock here in Lauderdale by the Sea, which is one of the first restoration projects of a reef. And then a little bit south of here in Dania, we have the jacks, which looks just like jacks that you play that game of, only they're gigantic and they form a natural reef here. So we're able to take the paddleboard out there, drop anchor, and snorkel. And then we create tours. We just go do fun activities. We have a 7-mile paddle that we do for people that want to really get into the fitness side of it. The very first tour we created was called the Venice of America tour, which is, we have the mega yachts and the mansions here, so that's a lot of fun. So people that are thinking, hey, I could do this as a business, it really is contagious and a lot of fun. So our eco paddle right now is really popular because the Bantity, they love to come right up to our very colorful boards. For some reason, they love orange and red boards, and they'll actually push us along, and they're just the friendliest creatures in the water. They look like a giant cow, but they're beautiful to look at. And I get excited every time I see them. How many times I see a manatee, they're just always inviting and fun creatures.
So I've seen a lot of people, I know you mentioned taking things on your board, and I have a picture here of having an adult beverage on your board. Are there any suggestions for taking drinks? Like I've seen a few people out on our lake with little cup holders, or how do you take refreshments out on your board?
That's a good question. First of all, you can see in one of your pictures the guy with the flag. You can take a cooler and set it on your board, and the boards are so balanced, it's likely not going anywhere, and it'll be just fine. Some other options, though, is and you can go to supsmart.com. This is our trademark of products. We have a little device that just simply slides right on your board. It fits a bottle or a can, and it just sticks right to the board. Just as easy, you can grab it and slide it right off, drink, and then slide it right back on, and it sticks right to your board. So that's just a product that we sell. We also sell cargo nets, which if you have the tie downs in your boards like this, then you just take the cargo net and latch it right in. It just hooks right into it. If you don't have built-in tie downs, though, no worries. We have deck rigging kits that you can glue on your board and be able to attach the cargo net that way also.
Do the cargo nets, I know when I'm paddleboarding, I often have my dog on the board. So everything that I put on the board with me, I have to be really careful because I can usually keep from falling, but having her on the board and she likes to she gets right up on the very edge of the board and just like gets so close that she eventually just falls in, and then we both fall in. My board is gonna be toppled. Would a cargo net hold things in if it were to flip or to just kind of rock?
Yes, depends on what you're carrying on your board, but the cargo net is intended to stretch up to 3 times its size. And having said that, we have dry bags. So you can simply take a dry bag and put your change of clothes in there, some tennis shoes, some dog treats if you want, even some snacks and some drinks, and then put that inside the dry bag, and then take the dry bag and put it underneath the cargo net. And even if the board were to get tipped over, which happens maybe 1 out of 1,000 times with me, and that's usually from a boat going by really fast if you're in some intercoastal waterways. So it's really highly unlikely that's going to happen. We're really, our customers are shocked when they come in and they're thinking the whole time that we're going to laugh at them because they're going to fall in and they're going to be wet and keep falling in. And they're surprised that most of the time they don't ever even fall in, not once. And as a beginner, you've got about a 50-50 odds that you're not even going to get in the water. Now, a dog obviously brings something different to the table because they like to wander around your board and can make it a little bit off balance at times. But with that cargo net, it's a good way to secure your items. If the board tips completely upside down and you have the cargo net attached with the dry bag, all of your stuff is going to stay secured to the board and stay dry. So there are plenty of options for what you asked. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. And actually, it brings up another good point because I actually usually track my my paddles on using the Navionics app on my phone so that I can see how far I went and how fast I went, what my max speed was, what my min speed, what my average speed was, which is really good for the people that are looking for they're practicing for races too. But I think the dry bag is perfect for that because even if you have like I don't have a waterproof case, which is kind of crazy as much as I'm on the water, but if I just put it in a dry bag and then put it in that net, then I'd be good and I could track my whole trip.
Yes, and since you mentioned that, we also have, and all this again, it's at supsmart.com. We have the best, because we've learned from our mistakes. We've seen people lose phones. I've lost 3 of them myself. So in doing that, I experimented with a few different phone cases and then manufactured one that is transparent on both sides so you can take pictures while you're on the water. It floats, so if for some reason you drop it, you don't have to worry about it sinking down to the bottom. And of course, it's waterproof, and the way we've designed the way it opens up very easily and the toggles don't break. It's really a very high quality waterproof phone case. So, when you're on the water, you're going to see stuff that you want other people to be able to see what you did. So it's great to be able to take your phone with you. And, I highly encourage people not to answer their phones when they're out there and to take a break from your phone. But let's face it, an emergency can happen, and it's a good idea to have one with you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the reasons that I love the water so much, because it lets me get away from that stuff. But you're right. I do that. I do want to take my phone to track my trips and so that I can take pictures. So what I usually do is turn it on airplane mode, because the Navionics app will still track me, and then I can turn it off of airplane mode if I need to call somebody. God forbid. I have yet to need my cell phone out there, but mostly just need it for taking pictures. So you were talking about all these different things that you can do on the paddleboard. So can you give some examples of where you would do those different activities?
Well, we're very fortunate in South Florida because we have so many waterways to be able to travel down. You know, we have the intracoastal waterways, which can provide a challenge. If you want a really good challenge, we can take the intracoastal all the way to the port. And of course, if you're going through a port during high tide, if you're going with the tide, it's great. You get to move really fast and you don't have to do anything. If you're going against the tide, though, you may have to take 12 really good hard strokes to move a foot, which is a nice workout. But we do that, and then we ride the wakes of the largest ships in the world. So that's just one form of excitement. Of course, plenty of people like nice calm waters, like the Keys, where you can just see straight through to the bottom. Which it's Moses walked on water, and not too many other people I know of have. But this is about as close as you're going to get to walking on water. You can stand right above it, look straight down, and see the beautiful fish underneath of you, stingray, manatee in our case. And then we have the riverways around our shop. Our paddleboard shop, we're lucky, is located on the Middle River in Fort Lauderdale. So people launch right out our back door. And we're able to go to Collahatchee Park, which is 9.3 acre nature preserve. So that's fun. Or we can load up the truck and launch from the ocean. And there's a lot of reefs in the Florida area that are not that far from the shoreline, so very easily and attainable via a paddleboard. So you don't have to pay thousands of dollars for a motorboat, nor do you have to pay for all the maintenance and gas that are involved with those. A lot of people think that paddleboards are expensive, but for under $1,000, it is a vessel. It's considered a vessel. That's why we have to have a life jacket on board. It's a great way to be able to get around. I'm sure you're going to see some world records with people traveling by paddleboard to other countries one day. It's going to be crazy, the things that people will attempt to do.
I think it's a great point that you point out the life jacket, because that's something that a lot of people don't realize, I think, is that you are supposed to have a life jacket on the paddleboard. It's a good idea either way. And I mean, if nothing else, you can use it to kneel down on when your feet get tired, but you can actually get a ticket for not having a life jacket on a paddleboard.
You can, but I would emphasize that most people have it, just like you said, on the board. I see very few people wearing it. And quite frankly, the board itself is a gigantic flotation device. So as much as the Marine and Coast Guard required on board, it's not anywhere near as important as having a leash. Because if you get out there in the ocean, you could be the young lady that, rest her soul. She was in St. Petersburg with a group of people, very good swimmer, fell off the board, and the water just kept carrying that board farther away. Meanwhile, all her friends knew she could swim, and subsequently, they ended up watching her drown. It's kind of a sad story, but if she was wearing her leash, that would have never happened. So don't take it for granted. It's lakes and calm waterways. It's pretty easy to get away with not wearing a leash. But if you get out there in the ocean, wear a leash. We had another gentleman go to a race in Washington this past year, and he's a local. And there were some heavy winds and some currents in the river, and the same thing happened. This is a guy that can swim really good, wasn't wearing a leash, and he lost his life. And a lot of sad people down here because he was very loved and very popular with our sport. We like to race and have a good time, but don't take things for granted. This is a great sport. It's a lot of fun, but you still need to think smart. That's why we're SUP smart.
Wow, I'm glad you brought that up. That's something that I usually am in freshwater and on lakes and really calm water. So usually I don't have a leash. But as I'm starting to get more into the salt water and the waves, it's good for me to keep in mind, especially since my experience has mostly been in the more calm water, that a leash is that important. So I'm glad you brought that up. So for there are a lot of people I think out there that don't really know how they should choose a board. There are a lot of options, as you know. So what are some of the things that people should consider when they're trying to choose a paddleboard?
Well, first of all, don't go to Dick's Sporting Goods or Sports Authority, because you're going to try to find someone that can answer a question for you, and they're not going to know a thing about the paddleboards. I say that a little bit biased, because obviously we want you to come buy it from us. You can go to our website, or you can come see us in person. But the truth is we have a very well-trained staff that will teach you the proper things about the board. So a couple things that people need to know is the inside of most paddle boards are foam. And much like a car, if you don't have good paint on your car and then you get to what's underneath, it's just going to rust, it's going to deteriorate, and it's not going to last as long. A paddle board on top of the foam has a fabric, which is called it's called epoxy. And then, well, that's going to be your paste. Then what you're going to do is have your fiberglass go over top of your epoxy. So that is like a paste, and it will harden and then get smoothed out. And a lot of these companies out there that like the Dick's Sporting Goods, they don't really know what they're buying when they buy these boards. And it's very easy for a factory out of China to make a board at a lower price, and you think you're getting a good deal when simply you're getting 4 ounces of fiberglass and epoxy and only 2 layers of it. And the problem with that is you're that much closer to the foam, which means if you crack that seal, your board's going to take on water, and ultimately it's going to become really heavy. And I'm sure you've been to some rental locations and gotten on their boards and they weigh 50 pounds, and that's why they're made very cheap. Our boards, I would recommend, if you're looking for a board, look for something that has 3 layers, and you really want 6 ounces. That way your board's going to stand a chance to last as long as possible. And if you break the first seal or the second seal, you have time to fix it. And you can easily come to a paddleboard shop like ours. We're just going to put some epoxy over top of it, let it harden, smooth it out for you, and it'll be like you're seeing a bruise on your board, but now it's not going to take on water. Now, as far as being able to pick out the right board for you, you have to ask yourself, first of all, where are you going to be using the board? Are you going to be using it in the ocean, or are you going to be using it in calmer waterways, lakes, maybe a river? The difference is going to be if you're taking it out in the ocean, you have to take into consideration that there's a chop out there that's rocking you around a little bit, which means you're going to want a board that's a little bit wider and is going to give you a little bit more stability. And if you are in the ocean, then you got to ask yourself the second question. Am I going out in the ocean just because I like to be in the ocean and that's where I'm going to paddle most of the time? Or do I want to surf? So if you want to surf, then it takes you to getting a shorter board. Typically, you can get a 9'8". Most of the time, we will sell a 10'6" for people that want to surf out in the ocean. If they're not really surfing, but they just plan on being in the ocean, then I would probably recommend an 11'6" board. And all these half sizes, we typically make them 32 inches wide, which is a little bit wider than your traditional boards, but that's going to give you more stability. And typically, if you are catching waves, then most people aren't going to know what type of bottom to get on your board. And there's a flat bottom, there's a single concave bottom, and there's a double concave bottom. If you're not going to surf, don't even worry about it, because you're not going to notice that big of a difference. But if you're going to get serious about it, then a surfer is going to want to get a double concave bottom. Whereas somebody using their board, say for fishing or yoga or fitness, they're going to want a flat bottom. because that way it's going to stick to the water better and you're going to have less movement and better stability. Whereas if you're out in the ocean, that double concave bottom, it's going to have a little bit more curvature to it, which enables the water to flush underneath of your board and allows you to use your tri-fin system to catch the waves and be able to ride it much like a surfboard. And that's why it's becoming really popular in Hawaii now, because they're able to ride the waves a lot longer now. They're designing the boards differently where they're designed for surfing. So they're surf paddleboards. Most boards you're going to find are what we call all-around boards. And we probably sell about 90% of our boards are all-around boards. Your body type is probably going to indicate to me what type of board I'm going to sell you. A very tall person would probably ride a 12-foot board, whereas a very short person would probably ride a 10-foot or a 10'6" board. If you happen to weigh a lot, then you want some volume and some depth, which is going to be in the middle of your board. Most boards come in somewhere around 4 inches in the middle of their board. But if you weigh 400 pounds or are over 225 pounds, I'm going to recommend you get a nice high volume board, which we sell. There's not a whole lot of places out there. You couldn't go to a Dick's or a Sports Authority or even a Price Club or Costco and buy this type of board. So you need to come to a paddleboard shop that knows what type of board to show you to make sure that you're going to get the right board. Otherwise, you might be turning around and buying another board in another year because you just bought a board that really doesn't suit your body type. So, we like to match people up with asking them those questions, how they're going to use their board, and of course, knowing how much they weigh and their height. That has a lot to do with which board is going to be best for you. I hope that answers the question, but basically what I'm saying is if you're a petite person, get a smaller board. A 10'6" is going to be more enjoyable. If you're bigger, you want to get a bigger board. But a rule of thumb that everybody should know is the longer the board, typically the faster it's going to be. To make it a little bit faster, though, the more narrower the board, again, a little bit faster. So the ocean board that I sent you out on to maybe hold your snorkel gear might be 32 inches wide, 11'6", so you got a lot of stability. Whereas if you're in the river and you're going to be tracking a lot, you want some speed, then you're going to want a 12-foot long board that is 31 inches wide. So you lose some of that width, so you go a little bit faster. Now, if you're a petite, maybe a lighter weight female, an 11-foot board that's 31 inches wide would serve you better than a 12-foot board. It's also going to be a little bit easier to carry because you got to realize you look at the middle of the board here and there's a little handle that you're going to use to hold that board. If you catch some 15-mile-per-hour winds and you're a petite person, that board is going to twist your body in ways that it's not going to feel comfortable. And if you perhaps drop it, well, obviously you're going to have some scars on your board or maybe even crack it, which, it's easy to fix, but nonetheless, you probably want your board to look as pretty as long as possible.
So can you tell me why some boards have 3 fins and some boards have 1 fin?
Well, most people really don't need 3 fins. A single fin is going to be on most all-around boards. You're really only going to need your tri-fins if you're using them out in the ocean to do some surfing. Some people might use them for a little bit of extra balance if they're fishing. Not really need it though. If you're on the right board, you won't need the tri-fins for fishing. You really want to get a board that's designed specifically for fishing, which there are plenty of places that make them and do a really nice job. But if they specialize in that, they tend to charge a whole lot more. We have a manufacturer for the same price as our regular board. So you can get a nice fishing board for $800–900 pretty easily.
Okay, good, perfect. Yeah, I think that answers a lot of the questions that I heard before the webinar. I did have a lot of questions too from people that wanted to carry gear. For example, people that wanted to go try scuba off of their boards, or they wanted to go fishing. And what do you do with the fish after you catch them? Things like that.
Oh, well, it's pretty simple. I mean, you saw again from the one picture, the guy had a cooler that you can use it and sit it right on your board. You don't really have to have a special board for that. There are boards that have built-in tie downs that are specifically intended to hold coolers. But I find that any board that's 31, 32 inches wide will hold a cooler on it pretty well. So that's obviously where you're going to put your fish. We have boards that are designed for holding fishing rods, but you can also buy, there's Connect sub mounts that adheres to the flat surfaces on your board. It's not going to adhere to your deck pad, but if you have a flat surface on your board, it's going to adhere to it, and you can attach a fishing mount to your board that way if you wanted to. If you're taking out snorkeling gear, and again, we happen to put a milk crate on the front of ours and use our cargo nets to attach the milk crate to the paddleboard so it's not going anywhere. You mentioned scuba diving, and I personally have not seen anybody take scuba diving gear on there, although I probably will end up doing it myself. I recently just got my certification. But in order to do that, I'm going to need a board that supports 400 pounds because those tanks weigh pretty much. And then you're going to need to secure it down really good. So you're going to need some cargo tie downs to hold down the tank because, if you're carrying all your gear out there, you're carrying some pretty expensive equipment. The last thing you want it to do is fall off your board while you're paddling and not see it fall. Meanwhile, it's sitting on the bottom of the ocean somewhere. So I'm probably not going to advise too many people to try to go scuba diving off a paddleboard unless you're very experienced and you're on a board that can hold that kind of weight. Because most boards, they're intended to hold up to 200 pounds. By the time you add in your body weight and some scuba gear, probably not going to be the best idea.
Okay, that's really good to know. I have had a lot of questions about that and people interested in doing that. So good.
Easier to snorkel, much easier to carry snorkel gear.
So go for the free diving and snorkeling.
Absolutely, I would recommend it. It's a blast. If you can get out to the Keys where the beautiful water is, or if you're lucky enough to live near our jacks or our bio rock, we'll be happy to take you out. I've created both the tours myself, and I love them. They're my favorite activities. We've seen sharks. We've seen, actually, I know where the sharks are. If somebody wants to see them, I can just pretty much take you right to them. But we see octopus, we see the eels, we see the rays, and of course, all the beautiful exotic fish. So it's really a lot of fun to go check out our reefs.
Is that part of your eco tour?
No, our eco tour is a 2-hour paddle to a nature preserve. You're completely surrounded by mangroves once we reach the nature preserve, which happens to be our halfway point. And at that point, most people just take a little break and relax laying on their boards, but our guides will show a couple of demonstrations of, like doing a headstand on a paddleboard. It's something that most people think would be hard. I just started doing headstands when I started this company 5 years ago, and I can ride a wave on my head now. It's surprising how easy it is to do a headstand. And I'm approaching 50 years old, so if I can do it, I know most people can do it if they're willing to try. So, get out there and be a little bit creative and do some different stuff.
Yeah, I know. I was surprised at how I wouldn't say easy it was to do a headstand, but how quickly I figured out how to do a headstand on flat water. Don't know about the waves. Haven't tried that yet.
We have a technique where most of the weight is put on your elbows and you just plant your head, which is what we teach. And, if people just want to rest at the middle point, great. Otherwise, we'll either do that or we can do some Hawaiian spins, which the Hawaiian spins is really kind of like the beginning basics to surfing. Because you slowly slide your feet backwards towards the end of your board, and then your nose begins to rise. So now you're starting to kind of be able to use your paddle to turn your board in a circular motion much faster than if you were standing in the middle of the board, because now you're not centered. Your board is lifted, propelled upwards in the air. I don't know if anybody watches the Fox TV where they say for the fun of it, they have some commercials. You might see one where the board shoots straight up in the air at the end of it. That's me doing that one. So but it's fun to try, and we just take people out there and just want them to have fun. So, like I said, if you don't mind getting wet, get creative on your boards and have as much fun with them as you can, because it's really very easy to learn. Once you get on and start doing stuff, it's just very addicting.
It does. It sounds like there's a lot of really cool things to do. Some other questions that I had was some people were asking how you can paddle more of a straight line. That they had trouble where they went really far to the right and then really far to the left.
Well, it takes a lot of precision and practice, but there's a lot of videos out there that will teach you. If you Google or YouTube videos, there's plenty of training videos. If you go to our website, which is, we have two of them. One of them is the Sup Smart website, which is what I mentioned to you for our product line. But the other website is called sunrisepaddleboards.com. And John Denny, he doesn't work for my company, but he does a great lesson, and we show that to a lot of our guests because it makes it very easy to learn the basics of paddleboarding. If you really want to get into being able to keep that straight line, check out some of the clinics by the local racers in the area. We recently had Annabelle Anderson, who's the #1 female racer in the world. She came out and did a clinic for us. We've had some Olympians come out and do clinics. So if you're really serious about it, you want to learn how to just improve, then come out and do a clinic, and they'll be able to teach you the proper techniques to do it the way where it's really, really trying to get to perfection. Otherwise, you're going to find that you want to keep your arm straight up and actually be able to kind of look through a triangle, two of your arms holding together, and keep your blade as close to your rail as possible with your arm fully extended. Drive straight from the front of your board to the back of your board, and then just go right back to that same position. And what you'll notice is that it's hard to keep your board completely straight, but if you stay close to the rail, it's going to be as straight as you can possibly get it. What you typically want to do in that scenario then is just to practice taking 2, maybe 3 strokes on the left-hand side of the board, and then switch and take 2 to 3 strokes on the right-hand side of the board to try to maintain your nose in a straight position. But in a natural world, when you put that blade in the water and you start to pull, it's going to pull to the opposite side that you're pulling. So the key would be to really concentrate and keep your paddle straight up and run it right down the rail of your board as straight as you can be to keep your nose straight. It's a bit of a challenge, and it can actually cut off a few seconds if you're trying to race, which is really important. But in most cases, we're out there relaxing, having fun, just chilling out, and we don't even pay attention to whether our nose is really that straight. It's not that important. So just get out there and do a couple strokes on one side and then go a couple strokes to the other side. It won't be a perfect line, but it will get you right where you want to go.
Okay, good answer. Thanks. And then one last question. Any tips for people that are moving into paddling in waves that have been used to paddling in flat water?
Well, the natural tip would be to start off in smaller waves. Come down here to Fort Lauderdale Beach, because we have pretty small ones, I'm sorry to say. And then you can escalate maybe towards Melbourne, which has some bigger waves. But that's going to be the best way to do it, is just start off with some baby waves and get used to it. Get your legs where they feel good. I mean, anybody who's never paddleboarded before, your very first time you get on a paddleboard, it's important to realize that your brain is going to send a message to your leg saying, oh crap, we have never done this before. And you're going to feel like jello down there. You might be thinking, oh, I can't do this. just give it 10 minutes. That'll go away. And you're going to find the same thing out there when you're trying to ride waves. At first, your legs are trying to adjust to that, and you just need to give it some time and you keep practicing and be willing to fall down 1 or 2 times. When I go snow skiing, I start off on the green slopes. I don't jump right into the blacks. And I do greens, and then I go to blues. And by late in the day, I'm having fun on the blacks. But, by that time, both my brain and my legs are in agreement with each other that they're feeling pretty good. So realize a lot of it is mental. You just have to get comfortable doing it and practice it a few times, and you'll get better.
That's a great analogy. That's exactly what I feel like when I go snow skiing too. So, okay, well, if anyone has questions, you can use the Q&A button on your Zoom control panel. And if you have questions that we don't get to or you don't get a chance to type in, then you can email me after the webinar. You should have the information from signing up for the webinar. And I'll also have it in the last slide of the webinar presentation here. We also have Brian's contact information if you want to check out his website. He's told us a lot about a lot of different resources that are available on both of those websites. So definitely check those out. And I see one question coming in. Okay, so if you're fishing, would you suggest having 1 or 3 fins? And I think you started to touch on that. And how do you suggest, what do you suggest doing with the fish after you catch the fish?
I think I had addressed that earlier, that you just, if you have a cooler with you, then, if it's obviously the first of all is catch fish that are edible. Otherwise you're going to throw them back in the water, hopefully. But if you're planning on eating them, then bring some ice in the cooler and put them in your cooler. That would be the answer to that question. I don't think you need the 3 fins. It can add some stability for you, but in most cases, it's the shape of the board. You want a flat bottom board. You want a very wide board. 32 inches would be good. In some cases, a 33-inch board. I like the ones with a lot of volume on them because you're going to get a lot more stability. And what you would do, if you go to subsmart.com and look at the board called the Big Kahuna, that's a big board, and it provides a lot of stability, and that's what you want if you're going fishing. And we have some other boards in our shop that just arrived that have places to put your fishing rod, because you can go fishing and you don't have to have a place for your fishing rod. But for convenience purposes nowadays, we're making places where you can put your rod right in the little slot on the paddleboard, and maybe even have 2 or 3 rods out there with you if you're a big time fisherman. So it's definitely a growing sport, and you don't see as many people fishing on their paddleboards, but it's growing. And again, it could be one day that could become some type of Olympic activity or some type of contest. People will be taken out and trying to catch fish on paddleboards, and you can't use a boat. That'd be cheating.
Wow, well that sounds like great. I never even thought about taking multiple fishing rods on a paddleboard fishing. So we'll definitely check out the websites and that you suggested. And thank you again to Navionics for hosting the webinar. And thank you so much, Brian, for joining us and giving us all that great information. And hopefully a few of us will be able to see you down in Fort Lauderdale.
My pleasure, Jessica. Thanks for having us.